Howdy folks, I'd like to welcome you back to another episode of Knife Reviews with Iron Wings. So today we'll be looking at a knife that comes from Walmart. It costs about $3.99 and it is a Mora ripoff called the Ozark Trails Bait Knife. Comes with this plastic sheath and mystery steel, no known maker or steel type. So I've looked on the internet, I can't really find much more info about this. Seems to be a fairly ubiquitously accepted mystery steel and mystery manufacturer. Ozark Trail, the only way you'd tell this is from that producer, the Walmart generic brand, is this sticker that's on the back of the sheath that used to be here. This is actually fairly unique in Walmart since most of their knives or bladed weapons are kept under lock and key in my local super Walmart, even the Colhagen machetes and hatchets that they have. But this was just in a giant pile in the fishing and tackle section along with the lures and baits. Costs $3.99, $2.99, can't remember which, and it is, for the price you pay, not a horrible knife. Not a great knife, not a horrible knife. I expected it to come dull as most Frost cutlery or M-Tech blades would. And for $3.99 you really do get what you pay for. Most Mora knives, if you don't know the way they're constructed, have a small stick tane that goes in about a quarter of the handle's length. Maybe a little bit less. This one, it goes maybe a sixth or an eighth of the way in, and it's just a short hook tang. It's plenty sturdy enough for, skinning, filleting purposes, gutting, but otherwise, I wouldn't trust this to do any hard work that you would expect a Mora knife to be able to do. The blade is decent enough quality. It has a hole in the bottom to drain out any water, and it retains the knife itself fairly well. Honestly, when I got this home after picking it up for basically only this review, I expected it to be dull as could be, and it really isn't the case. It's still fairly sharp. You can feel points where it's just kind of dull. You can feel the skip in the edge, like there's a lack of any edge there, or like there's a giant chip in the blade. So that tells me this is a fairly soft steel. Add in the fact that I've already had to actually do a cut test with this knife, but had to refilm it due to errors in filming. Yeah, it's not an awful blade by any means for the price you pay. So before I go into the cut test, what are my thoughts on this? Don't buy it. For $2.99, $3.99, you can't really get much better of a product, but you really shouldn't be paying that little for a knife that you expect to use in the field. Something that you could use to depend on to keep you alive in a survival situation. For that, I'd recommend actually going out buying a real Mora. The only niche I can see, and I always try to go into these niche roles this knife might actually have in real life. The only niche role I can see this knife filling is potentially being your kid's first fixed blade knife or a tackle box knife for them to use to learn how to use a knife properly, and if they lose it, break it, you're out $2-3 versus $20 for a Victorinox or $20 for a Morg knife. But the thing is about the Mora or the Victorinox, you're going to have quality, and if the kid loses it, you'll be pissed. But if they don't lose it and they keep using it, it'll last a hell of a lot longer than this will. So even with that niche purpose, given the fact that for about 10 times the cost, you get infinitely better quality and manufacture for only a small increase. Relatively speaking, you're not talking going from a $20 knife to a $200, $300 knife. You're talking going from a $2 knife to a $20 knife. So that's my thoughts on it. Just don't buy this knife. Only reason I even got it was just for the purposes of this review. So first thing we'll go ahead and we'll do I'll do my usual test, my cut test. So first thing we'll test it on is this piece of taped cardboard. What this is just your bog standard box cardboard, something you'd expect to find in a warehouse that you get out of parts out of, or just usual packaging. And it's covered in a packing tape to simulate actually having to cut open a box. So let's see how it... yeah, it's rough. It really is. It crushed the first quarter or so, and you can see that by the fact that it didn't even cut. It just tore, and then it started cutting right about here when it started getting to that belly. So, not very sharp at all. So next we'll go ahead and we'll test cardstock. This is just your bog standard cardstock that you see, hearing protection, stuff like that will come in a warehouse. And it kind of cuts it again when you get to the belly, but otherwise it's just pretty dull, and it's acting more as a tear. And you can even see quite a bit of snowfall and more torn paper fibers on there than you do see cutting action. So this is more of a ripping and tearing action. How about paper? Let's see. Yeah, it gets a little bit of cutting. There we go. But that's just kind of, anyone can do that. The rest of the times you try, it'll cut every once in a while if you get the angle right, but otherwise it just rips and tears that paper. Okay, next, zip ties. This is something I encountered more than anything else while I was in the Army, and will it cut? Come on. No. No, it won't. It'll cut into it, but it won't cut it properly. You actually have to fold it over and break it in order to get it to work properly. Now mind, this is not me having used this knife quite a bit. This is literally the only thing I've used this knife for up to this point, is quite literally just this cut test. I did it right before this, and that is it. Okay, so how about blister pack plastic? This is kind of the stuff that everyone hates to deal with. And how is it cutting? It doesn't. It can't even it'll cut off little slivers, but it is not at all cutting the plastic in the way that previous knives have on this channel. How about paracord? Now, for those of you who don't know, the reason this is triple weave is not only so I can test its paracord cutting, which is something most military members will experience, or even warehouse workers, but also just because the triple weave is to simulate seatbelt material. Seatbelt material is actually quite difficult to cut, and it's the reason why most military, police, and first responders will carry a specific gut hook design tool with a razor's edge inside to cut seatbelts, because it's much quicker, much easier than using a knife or a pocket knife. So, how does it cut the paracord? That time it cut a little bit cleaner. The first time I cut it, there was quite a bit of torn fiber and fabric left over. So that was a cut test. Let's knot this end back up and see how it does with a pull test, as Chris would do on that knife, that company to be named later. So, pull test. Oh. Yeah, it cut it well enough. It's a lot cleaner than it was originally, but even still, it's pretty gnarly looking. So, even with that cut test doing just about okay, this kind of shows what I said when I first shot this review, is you shouldn't buy this knife. For the price you pay, yeah, you're getting a decent enough knife, a burner blade, but it's still going to be hot garbage. It can barely qualify as being sharpened, and it's just one rung above a Frost knife or an M-Tech blade. And those are pretty much the ubiquitous knife community standard for being pretty poor quality and being more collectible than useful. So should you buy this knife? Hell no, just give it a pass. If you see this in your Walmart, chuckle at the price, chuckle at the knife itself, and then keep on walking, because it really isn't worth the $2.99. Just get yourself a actual Mora. It's worth it. It's a higher build quality, and I have much more faith in its design and build quality than I do a mystery, more than likely Chinese blade made out of the cheapest steel they can that goes dull after just barely cutting through cardboard, cardstock, paper, and 550 cord. This is not hard use, people. This is barely even a day's work of what you'd get in a warehouse. This is like an average morning for me when I was in the Army, cutting open parts boxes, cutting open cardboard shipping containers, cutting zip ties off of cables for almost anything the parts come in, and 550 cord. You cut more of this than the Army than you do anything else, and it just barely cuts it cleanly. So, my honest opinion, just give this knife a pass. I appreciate you watching Iron Wings this week, and I hope to see you guys subscribe down below. Give it a like and comment what you think about this knife, if you have any experience in it, what you want to see reviewed next. I think my next week's review is going to be another one of my Storytime with Iron Wings, one of my untouchables. Not sure which one I'll be doing, since there's only going to be about 10 to 12 episodes of that, if that many. So again, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you guys next week.